Merry meet. I've seen a lot of videos on YouTube about books of shadows, how they're structured, how they're made, what's in them, and so on. But I haven't seen a lot of videos about is the difference between a book of shadows and a book of mirrors. Now, I know a lot of people use the same book and call it a book of shadows and use it for both functions. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I wanted to discuss the differences anyway. So yeah. Now, a book of shadows can be many things, but usually it is sort of like a witch's holy book. Or basically you put in your spells and rituals, various bits of wisdom and information you have, and it sort of becomes your guidebook. And it also becomes the book that if you teach somebody someday, you can give that information on. And very often a book of shadows is a mix of personal experiences, personal rituals, things you have found in books, things you learned from others, and so on. So it sort of becomes how should I put it? A Bible for your path, your personal one. And for some people it's more of a spell book. Others have very little spells in it but have a lot of wisdom, and like they can write up how they view the elements, how they view spirit communication, and so on. So yeah, that's a book of shadows. Now, a book of mirrors, that's sort of like a magical diary. So that when you do a ritual, you'll write it up there, perhaps leaving space so that you can write up how the ritual turns out. You can write up divinations, you can write up all sorts of things. Dreams you have, and yeah, not a lot of people put this in their book of shadows, or they have other book of mirrors into several sections. They might have one dream diary, one book for tarot readings, and so on. But yeah, basically, a book of mirrors is your magical diary. Now, why would it be a benefit to keep a book of mirrors? Well, first of all, it will not prove magic to others. It might help alleviate doubts in yourself, because then you can see that, okay, when I do rituals, more often than not, my rituals and spells have effect. And you can also see that I have had some strange goings on lately, and you might trace that back to a ritual. And you can also then go back and see that if you also then note in your entries what moon phase it was and so on, you can see that really, for me, weather magic works a lot better when the moon is on its way down and it's raining than when the moon is on its way up and there's sunshine. It helps you identify the times when magic is the strongest for you. So yeah, now what sort of um, book should you use for a book of mirrors? Now, very often these gets filled a lot quicker, because in a book of shadows you pick and choose, you pick information that's important to you. And yeah, I can show you mine. I have it here. This is my book of shadows. Now for me, the book of shadows is more of a spell book. So I have spells and rituals. Yes. If my camera would focus, it would be nice. Yes, spells and rituals, for the most part. And some of these are picked from places on the internet, some are picked from books, some I have written myself. And it's just basically, it's like a cookbook for magic. That's how I do my book my a Book of Shadows. Now, this is um pretty cheap book, really. I like the Trickweta there and so on, but I am planning on getting one of those big expensive ones at one point when I have completely solidified my path and wants to write something up that can be inherited by a student one day. But for now I use these books. Basically, for a Book of Shadows you want something that's fairly sturdy, that will last because you will be using it for a long time. And yeah, now for a Book of Mirrors you want something that you don't feel bad about writing in, because at least for me, in my Book of Mirrors everything goes in: dreams, divinations, prayers, everything in my that has to do with my occult, supernatural, spiritual practice, it goes into that book. So I need to have one that's fairly big and which doesn't cost enormous amounts of money and is good to write in. Personally, I use these books. They are from Emo. Yes, that's actually the company name. And as you see here, there are lots and lots and lots of blank pages that are lined. But yeah, I like those that are hardback because then I can write with it on my lap. I don't have to have a table. I tried to use just those notebooks, that spiral bound notebooks. The problem is that most of them are not hardback, and then it gets difficult to write them on when I have them on my knees, because that book just goes with me everywhere. So yeah, but back to the differences between the two. For me, it's become sort of important to separate the two, because the Book of Shadows is more like a record of my path. It shows the rituals I use. And of course, some of the rituals that goes into that temporary Book of Shadows that I showed you will not be transferred into a proper one, because I might only use them a few times. I find they're not really that for me. So into the book there, really every spell and ritual I see that I might like to do, that just goes into there. And some I just put in there for fun as well, because they are completely outrageous. But we will put it in there. But basically, Book of Shadows is your path. You're writing a book that will last for many years. While Book of Mirrors is more like your workbook. I guess you can that would be a good explanation for it. Now at school you have basically your textbook that tells you about the topic and so on. Your Book of Shadows is sort of like that. Though you write it yourself, it's your textbook. It's your book of knowledge, your book of the path. While your Book of Mirrors is more like your notebook, where you jot down everything. So yeah. Now, do I recommend people having a Book of Mirrors and a Book of Shadows, or combining them? For me, it wouldn't have worked to combine them, because really I write down so much that I would never be able to find my rituals if I had them all in the same book, because I can easily fill one of those big books in 2 months. So, but if you don't do that many rituals, it might work to have them together. But for me, it works better to have one notebook where I can just jot everything down, and then have one Book of Shadows where things that will last, which is more like a text, when it becomes more like a textbook than a notebook. So yeah, now, should you have one Book of Mirrors or several? I have one. I have my dream diary, my tarot card information, my rituals, everything that I do that's within the spiritual genre, it goes into one book. But I know some occult authors do recommend having one dream diary, one book for rituals, one for divinations, and so on. And I can see the benefit in that because it will be more organized. But for me, it's just the practicality of it. I have one book, jot everything down there, just go by date instead of topic, basically. So that works very well for me. So yeah. But really, the reason I wanted to make this video is that I hear a lot of talk about the Book of Shadows, but very little about the Book of Mirrors. And I think that a lot of pagans doesn't even know that within typical witchcraft there is something that's known as the Book of Mirrors. So yeah, really this is more like an information video, but yeah, basically in many paths it's not common to have the Book of Shadows and the Book of Mirrors as one. You write down basically the Book of Shadows is your recipe book, your book of information of wisdom of how the runes works, how the tarot works, how the elements works, and so on. Basically your textbook, your personal textbook of your path, while your Book of Mirrors is the notebook where you jot down your experiences. Like if I see an orb, I might jot down, oh, I was playing with my computer game, and I saw an orb. It was such and such date, such and such moon phase, and so on, some information on it. That sort of things would go then into my Book of Mirrors. The same when I do a ritual, I will note down the ritual, if I felt something particular, how I felt doing that ritual, if there were some difficulties, if there's something I feel that I need to improve, and so on and so forth. That goes into the Book of Mirrors. If, however, I come across a spell I want to use, and so the recipe of it, that goes into the Book of Shadows. But when I perform that spell, that the information on how that spell went and so on, that goes into the Book of Mirrors. So sort of Book of Shadows, textbook, Book of Mirrors, workbook. At least that's how I see it and how I view it. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the topic. I think that having both a Book of Shadows and a Book of Mirrors can be helpful. I think that when you shop around for a Book of Mirrors, you should basically look for something cheap, so you can write a lot in it without feeling guilty. It doesn't need to be as durable as a Book of Shadows, because generally you write it out and you put it on a shelf and you take it out when you need to see how the path worked for you 2 years ago. And you want, at least that's my recommendation, something that's hardback, because then it's easy to put it on your lap and write, because you don't always have access to a table. That would be my advice. So yeah, should you keep them? Yeah, you probably should. I haven't always kept mine, because sometimes I get my place is overflowing with shit, and I just have to get rid of some things, and I sort of feel a bit bad about that. But yeah, I'll try to keep them from now on, because I think it could be very interesting to go back 10 years and see, oh, that's how such and such thing worked for me 10 years ago. You see your progression. So yeah, that's my thoughts about the Book of Shadows vs Book of Mirrors. And again, if you combine the two and write up your experiences and ritual to do in your Book of Shadows, there's nothing wrong with that. There's no rule that says you have to have a Book of Shadows and a Book of Mirrors. I'm just mentioning this because there is a term that is Book of Mirrors, so that if you, for example, feel that it is confusing to have everything in one book, then you might want to have a Book of Shadows and a Book of Mirrors. And I also wanted to recommend these emo protocols. They have them in several sizes. This is the biggest one. It has 192 pages, which becomes 384, I think, individual pages. Basically, it's, yeah. And so it's big, it's durable, and it's not too expensive. But yeah, there's a lot of different notebooks you can use. I like those because they're hardback and they are very scratch proof, and I've had more fancy books and they tend to disintegrate because I use them so much. So yeah, little bit of a recommendation thrown in there as well. So yeah, hope you have enjoyed this video. Have a great day and blessed be.